Well, hello there. Welcome back to the channel. It's always nice to see you again. Are you ready for our next adventure? Well, I hope you find this entertaining. Enjoy. Folks, welcome back to the channel. I really appreciate you, and welcome back to the backyard. Today's video, we're going to talk about mounting plates and kayaks. So, if you're looking to mount something to your kayak and you want it to be mounted securely and have a really strong bond to the kayak, like you're mounting something super heavy duty like a downrigger or a rod holder where you're catching big fish, or a landing gear, something like that to your kayak, and you want it to be super strong, the best way to do it is to put a plate on the inside of the kayak. And the bigger the plate, the more that pressure or the weight is distributed along the kayak. So larger plates are more secure than smaller plates. So what we're going to do today is show you how you can install one of these guys inside your kayak, even if you can't reach where it's going to go. So in this case, I've mocked up this imitation kayak here, and you can see if I mount this plate here, there's no way that I can hold that plate. There's no way I could take this plate and reach in there and put it in there. But I'm going to mount it on the inside of that piece of plastic right there. I'm going to show you how to do it. So stick around, it's going to be a good one. Okay, so let's talk about this plate for just a second here. I have this, well, it's a piece of garbage I picked out of my scrap bin, but this is my imitation rod holder, so you have to use a little bit of imagination that this is a rod holder. And here's the plate that I'm going to put on the back. But what I want you to notice is, as I mentioned earlier, a larger plate's better. So you can see that the structure that I'm mounting on the outside of the kayak is going to be a lot smaller than the plate that's on the inside. So all this extra aluminum that you see sticking off the side here, that's just going to distribute the pressure that this is exerting on the outside of the hull, and it's going to transfer it to a larger surface area on the inside of the hull. And so the bigger this is, the better that pressure or weight distribution is across the inside of your kayak. And the more surface area you can apply, the less pressure per square inch that you're going to be applying to your hull. So, as I said before, bigger is better. Wait a minute, I'm not sure that came out right. Okay, let's stop all the gum flapping and actually get to the process of mounting this plate on the inside. So the first thing we want to do is decide, well, where are we going to mount this guy, and what orientation do we want to mount it, all that good stuff. And I like to use the plate because that is a direct representation of where the holes need to be drilled. And so I'm just going to place this on an area that I think looks good, and yeah, that right there looks pretty good to me. So now I'm just going to mark where I need to drill the holes. And this is the scary part, right? Nobody likes to drill a hole in their kayak. But if you're gonna mount something on your kayak, it kind of needs to happen. All right, so I've marked the spots where those holes need to go, and now I need to drill the holes. Okay, now we got it marked. I'm going to drill our holes, and I selected a bit that's slightly oversized. I do that just because it's not as critical that everything lines up perfectly if your holes are just slightly oversized, which is what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and line these guys up and drill them out. Okay, I want to point out that I'm using a pointed bit in the middle. I use these bits when drilling anything like wood or plastic, something that's soft. It just helps keep the drill bit from moving around and crawling across your surface when you're trying to drill something relatively accurately. My mounting screws will fit in there. We're ready now to get this guy mounted on the inside there. Okay, now to get this guy in here, the surface, I need to somehow fish something down there to get a hold of it and bring it up here and mount it to the inside. Okay, so a really cost-effective way to do that is a coat hanger. So that's what we're going to use, coat hanger, because that's what's going to work. Okay, I'll just straighten this out. Now it doesn't really need to be all that perfect. In fact, on the end that I'm going to be sticking in here, I've got a pretty tight turn to make here, so I'm just going to have that curve just a little bit to get me started. Now I need to, once I get this in there, I'm going to need to use this to pull through a cord. And so I'm going to stick this down in there, and it doesn't need to go all the way to the other end and stick out as long as I can reach in and grab it. Now what I need to do is attach my cord to this material, and just P-staple do it. If you've got a really tight hole to get through, you could potentially use super glue to hold that on there, and or heat it and stick it on the end. Pick your poison, but a P-staple do it. Okay, so I'm going to use just some clear plastic tape because this is what was in the first junk drawer that I came to. It doesn't need to be all that durable or anything. I just need to get it from here to there, and that's not going to take much. And I'm just going to push this through here. And then at the other end, I'm going to pull it through. Sure I am. Okay, now if we can imagine that that cord is now sticking out of the access hatch in my kayak at the other end. So, sorry you're having to use some imagination in this video, but that's the case. Okay, so now I need the other end to go through here. And I will also add that in a lot of kayaks you have vertical pieces like scupper holes and stuff that are coming up through the kayak. And whatever hole you fish this line through on the first run, you want to make sure this goes through that same run. It has to be through the exact same area, otherwise it'll get hung up on whatever else is in there. So, new piece of tape. What we're going to do is this cord's going to go through these holes on the mounting plate, and you want to get the two holes that are furthest away from each other to make it line up as well as possible. So in this case, I'm just going to use the diagonal hole. So we're going to put the next one through here. Okay, now you can see we've got both ends that are sticking out from the access hatch of my kayak, and this is where I'm going to attach the plate. Okay, let's talk about this plate a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to attach this plate to the fish cords that I fished through here, and I'm going to go down through. And I should point out that in my case, these holes are drilled in here in a symmetrical way, meaning that I could run it through this way or that way or this way. It doesn't matter. It's 4 holes and they're evenly spaced relatively, and so they're going to line up down there no matter what. But if you had a plate that had an odd hole spacing, you need to make sure that this is in the exact orientation of the holes that you drill down here. So now's the time to pay attention to what you're doing. So before you haul it all the way to the front of your kayak or the back of your kayak, you want to make sure that your hole pattern is up and in the same orientation as your drill pattern. My case, they're symmetrical, doesn't matter. So I'm just going to do this. Okay, so we're going to tie this in a simple square knot. There we go. Okay, so now my plate is ready to haul in there. What I do now at this point, because when I mount this plate on the inside of the kayak and I take off my
when I remove my rod holder, I don't want this plate to fall down on the inside of my kayak and then I have to go through this charade all over again. I want to make sure that when I get this in place that it stays there. And so one of the things that I do is I typically sand this a little bit, rough it up a little bit, and then I put some silicone glue on there. So when I pull this in there, it will now have glue on it and it will stick to the inside of the surface, and over a couple of days, the silicone glue will vulcanize and adhere to the inside of the kayak. Now, the reason why I use silicone glue is because it's flexible. In the kayak, when it gets warm and cold, it shrinks and expands. When it's in the water, hitting waves, it's flexing. It's doing all this sort of rotational stuff. And having a flexible sealant or glue on there will keep that plate adhered to it. Now, I had done some experiments with plates on the outside of the kayak with screws, and when I removed the screws, it was difficult to get it off of the kayak itself. So I know that this glue works really well, and that's what I use when I mount a plate on the inside. Okay, I got a crow up here. He's going to probably yell at me in the middle of this, but we're going to add some glue to the bottom of this and get it ready to pull up there. So it doesn't take a lot. I'm just going to put a couple of dollops in here. Okay. I'm just going to set it in here in this orientation that I want to pull it in there with. And if this were a kayak, I would be setting it on the bottom of the hull there, getting it ready so that when I pull it in this way, it's a nice smooth transition all the way. Okay, so we got our plate down in here and we have glue applied to it. We're ready to pull it in. One of the things I should point out is you need to make sure that your pull strings aren't twisted in there. If they are, generally speaking, they'll untwist if you have enough room for them to untwist underneath your hull area. In this case, I don't, so I need to make sure that's absolutely perfectly straight. So we're going to now pull this in, and hopefully everything will line up. Oh yeah, that looks good. All right, so I am now pulling this in, and I can move those strings around to get those to line up. And if I'm not thrilled with the way that they're lining up, I can stick a screwdriver in there and adjust things slightly. And now you can see where those oversized holes make a nice difference. And so now to hold this in place, I'm going to put in my mounting screws. And once I get these mounting screw, well, at least this mounting screw in place here, I can still adjust my hole pattern a little bit, make sure everything's lining up. Okay, that looks good. Now you can see why having multiple holes in your plate is helpful, because now with the cord, I'm able to hold this in place and rotate it around and make sure that the holes all line up. Now you could put in a plate here with a single hole using the same technique. It's just a little bit more challenging to get the hole to line up with just the cord, but a little bit of silicone on the bottom of that and getting it to line up. You'd have to come up with some way of holding it in place, bungee cord or something on your cord to hold it in place until that glue vulcanizes. Once that glue vulcanizes, that's not going to come off. That's going to stay on there just fine. So now we have our plate mounted in here, and you never saw my hand crawl up in here to do that. So we have an interior mounted aluminum plate, relatively permanently mounted on the inside of our kayak. Now we can bolt on our rod holder, and it'll be secure in place, and it'll be tied directly to a metal plate on the inside of our kayak. Now if you want to see how I made that plate, it's real simple. Just continue watching. I'll go through the process of making that plate.
A lot of people are unfamiliar with the fact that you can cut aluminum with woodworking tools. As long as you have a carbide tipped blade, it'll work fine. I've cut thousands of feet with this blade right here, and it's as good as it ever was. Here I am cleaning up the edges just to make sure everything's smooth and round and nice, and so it's not pressing into the plastic of the kayak hull. Okay, the next step here is after we get it cleaned up, we're going to mark where the holes are going to be drilled, and just make sure that you're aware of any undulations in the underside of the hull to make sure your plate lands nice and flat. It's important that you keep that stuff in mind. Okay, here you see me using a screw to do a set in the aluminum so that the bit starts in the correct spot. I'm using a screw for two reasons. One, I want you to see that it doesn't take anything special to make this all work and happen. And the second reason is I couldn't find my punch. So yeah, used a screw. It worked. Okay, here I'm drilling the holes in the plate. I'm using a hand drill. I prefer to use a drill press, but I'm using a hand drill just because I want you to see that you don't need anything special to be able to do this. It can be done with simple hand tools. It is ideal, though, that you squirt your bit with some cutting fluid. WD-40 works just fine. Any kind of lubricant, honestly, will work, but it just saves your bit, that's all. It cuts a lot better if it has some lubricant. Okay, our next step is going to be to cut some threads in this plate. We want to be able to put our machine screws directly into this and have them thread into it. I don't want to have to reach in underneath and put nuts on it, so we're going to have to cut threads in it. Now, you notice that I drilled that out. Well, the drill bit I used is the one that comes with the tap that I'm using as well, so it's a no-brainer there. Just use the drill bit that came with. Okay, when you're starting to cut the threads here, you want to advance it slowly, and if you back it out a little bit and then go forward again, it helps. Again, cutting fluid also helps immensely. It's an absolute must when you're cutting threads in steel, but with aluminum, it certainly does help. So make sure you put some lubricant on your tap when you're doing this. Also, I might add that if you put any side pressure on a tap, they're really hard metal, which makes them incredibly brittle. If they break, you cannot drill it out. The only thing you can do is screw it out if there's enough of it sticking out that you can get some pair of pliers on it. Otherwise, you're starting from scratch. You're getting a whole new piece and starting over. So be real careful when you're starting to cut your threads. Just go slow and make sure it works. And you can see here that I'm going to thread in the machine screw that we're going to be using to hold in our faux rod holder, and sure enough, it fits in there just perfect. And I'll run it in with a screwdriver here to make sure that it does actually work. So now we know that screw is going to hold whatever device we're putting on the kayak. It's going to hold it firmly, and we're going to go through and cut the rest of these now. Hey, if you've made it this far, it'd be a good thing to like and subscribe. I could use the subs. Thanks, guys. And really, once the remainder of these threads are cut, we're pretty much done. You can rough up the surface with some sandpaper to improve glue adhesion, but generally speaking, you're ready to go. Clean it up and go put it in your kayak, man. Thanks for watching, everyone.